What's up, everybody? It's Zane Denani again, doing a tight 10 for you guys. What do you say we get into it? I'm going to pay attention to the chat today. If you guys have questions, I'm going to get to them at the end. So I'm going to make sure that I pay attention to that, and then also am able to go through all of the latest news and notes. Let's get started. All right. For the Raiders, there's an article in ESPN that talked about what they're going to do from an offensive perspective. Very much sounds like they're going to be operating in more 12 personnel, which means two tight ends on the field. Sounds like a guy like Michael Mayer will get much more playing time given that. There's not many times when I'd recommend a tight end handcuff. I do think that Michael Mayer is one of those types of players who's probably more of a top 15 tight end in the NFL in general in terms of talent. Um, he he just has landed in probably the worst possible opportunity of nearly all time. One, the offense in general was terrible last year. His rookie season, I believe he was in a similar situation without Brock Bowers. And then they draft Brock Bowers and put him in this spot where he's now a backup. He was another one of those tight ends that kind of like broke some who were just incredible in college. And not just from a pass catching perspective, also can block. So I think he has some untapped upside. This season, I'd say he's more of a handcuff, just because you're not going to be able to rely on him week to week unless they run 12 personnel at a records pace, which I think the top 12 personnel rate over the past like 4 or 5 years is about 69%. So everything that you're doing in terms of hinging on Michael Mayer is probably more of a handcuff. I think that he's not a bad, like, if you have a deep league, to stash him on your bench in case of Brock Bowers gets hurt, because I think he'd be the number one pass catcher if Brock did get hurt. Or if you're in Dynasty, really good stash because he could go anywhere next year. He's a contract year. On top of that, I think in a best ball situation, um, not a terrible pick because he may score touchdowns, give you enough, like sometimes, hit your lineup given the type of week that they have. And then, if a Brock Bowers gets injured, then he produces a lot more value in general. So I'm somewhat bullish on a guy like Michael Mayer for this season, comparative probably to the market. He's one of the few handcuffs that I see out there. It's an article from the Patriots team website where they were kind of talking about Travion Henderson, what he offers, what, kind of how year one went for him as a rookie. And a lot of it talks about, hey, the things that we know kind of intuitively, right? Watching the film, breaking it down, needs to get better and more consistent between the tackles. And then on top of that, he came into being a rookie and he was billed out of college as being this incredible pass blocking and pass receiving running back. And then what ended up happening was he didn't really showcase those skills in year one. So I think that had a lot of people confused. I like to say this and preface this about rookies, especially. In some situations, rookies come in and they don't have a running back on the roster who is like an adequate running back, right? So Ramondre, I'd say, is a above average running back, and you have to do a lot in order to earn playing time in this league. And Ramondre is actually not a bad pass catching back either. He's a really strong pass protection guy as well. And they had Antonio Gibson last year before he got injured. So they were kind of doing this rotation thing. And now Travion Henderson coming into year two, they're talking about ways that they can get him more vertical routes. So that signals to me like, hey, we want to get him involved in the pass game, but not like a traditional running back where, hey, he's just leaking out on pass plays. We want to get him involved in situations where he's still going to be lined up as a running back, but maybe he does a wheel route, maybe he does a Texas route, maybe, and those are things that are like deeper down the field, right? Like when you look at running backs and their ADOTs, they're usually like almost negative sometimes, right? Like close to like the line of scrimmage. And they want to use him in a way that's a little bit more downfield. I can see a situation where he improves quite a bit. I don't think he's gonna like take over the lion's share of any of the running back duties this season without an injury with Ramondre because or some sort of large fumble problem. Just because Ramondre is a good running back, so this really comes back to like what individual value can he bring on his own? Can he make this a 50-50 split where he's getting the pass down work and then he's getting some of like the outside rushing work where Ramondre maybe gets goal line and between and then like short yardage plus, maybe like 10 to 12 rush attempts per game. I think he can do that. I still want to believe in the profile. I think that he has that skill set that you want in fantasy. And so that's the reason why like I've tweeted about this. You can't really completely, if you're building a portfolio, you can't completely fade a Travion Henderson because he still has the skill set to break fantasy, right? He's incredibly explosive when he gets the ball and reads the blocks properly. And then if he gets this pass down role just by nature of like him improving year over year, then we're talking about a guy that can really produce a lot of value. So I'm not like super fading Travion. I think that his cost relative to Ramondre, I'd rather bet on Ramondre, but you can't fade a guy like Travion Henderson fully because of his skill set. Moving on to the Bills. I was listening to One Bills live. This is funny. I was listening to this with my children in the car because I'm a sicko, and that's the kind of stuff that I like to do when I have my kids in my car. Anyway, I was listening to them, and they were kind of talking about Khalil Shakir and how important he is to the pass game. They were saying, hey, this guy might play more this season, run more routes than he did last year. Last year was a little bit weird for the Bills. They did even a rotation for a guy like Khalil Shakir. I think some of it comes back to the fact that they were doing some 12 and 13 personnel with their tight ends. And so that takes a slot off the field sometimes. And traditionally, they like to run Khalil Shakir out of the slot. Doesn't mean that they won't do that as much this year. I think that the person that was kind of like commentating this whole podcast just believes that Khalil Shakir is really important to their offense. And I agree. He's important to their offense. It doesn't mean he's going to have really big fantasy games. And when I look at his totals from last year and even the year before, he's not a guy that produces big spikes. So, like, my opinion on a Khalil Shakir is that you're not really winning much with him because a lot of what he does is this short, like way too short, average depth of route work. Something that I think is like record short because when I was looking at the data and I wrote my route depth article, he was one of those guys that stood out as an outlier with like a 4 to 5 average depth of route. And then you look at his average depth of target, which is also very small. And so I'm not like inclined to draft a Khalil Shakir just because I think that his role is like very unique in the NFL. But they did mention that he may end up running a little bit deeper this year. I don't necessarily see it. I feel like it's Joe Brady again bringing back his offense. Why would they change much, right? All right, moving on to, and I don't really trust Jason La Canfora. That's why I said this here. And I've talked to a bunch of Ravens fans, and what I've tried to do is actually go into the Reddits of these different teams to understand which beats they trust and which beats they don't. Some of it is vibes based because there's different beats that. What I want to say is they present the information differently. And some people don't like when someone's critical of the team, right? So there's a Grant Cohen for the 49ers who's very critical of the 49ers, and people just don't like that. But he does have credentials. He's at practices. So if he reports that he saw X, Y, and Z, I'm still going to report that because that's important to me. Now, his opinion on George Kittle in general, like that's something that I wouldn't necessarily, you know, take at heart. But I do like seeing the refreshing information where somebody's presenting a different argument than what the populace is doing. So anyway, Jason La Canfora was basically saying he talked to a bunch of GMs. He talked about Mark Andrews and Darren Waller, and that some GMs basically said that they think that Darren Waller is more effective and better than Mark Andrews at this point in his career. I don't necessarily trust what Jason La Conforta says fully. I don't think that he would report that he talked to GMs and personnel men that said that. I don't think he would make that up. So I think this is real. I'm on record saying that I think Darren Waller is going to play. He said that he wants to play for a contender. I think that there's a natural fit with the Ravens, especially if they don't end up getting Stephon Diggs. He could line up as like that F tight end where he's playing more of the slot role for the team. And, they can stretch Zay Flowers out. He doesn't have to play a full route share, but when he does play, like let's say if they're down, they can rely on him to try to do a comeback or something. It might be hard to figure out games where he's going to go off, Darren Waller, if he does get mixed into the fray. But for a best ball situation, I think he's a really strong last round pick because I do think that he's going to end up uh, on a roster this season. And then for Mark Andrews, I do think that he is live to get some routes taken away from him if they do go the direction of a Darren Waller or even a Jonnu Smith or Zach Ertz or something. And I do think that they feel like there's a little bit of depth missing at that tight end position. And we know Declan Doyle comes from Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson's famously all about the tight end position. I talked about it today in my tweets. And so I'm a little bit worried about them potentially signing one of these veterans, only because I think that it just naturally takes away some routes from a Mark Andrews. Broncos wide receiver 3 battle. Big question for everybody, especially when you're building out like a best ball room, or if there's opportunity for one of these guys to potentially step up and have a full-time role. My news for you guys, I don't think that the Broncos are going to put any of these wide receiver 3s in a full-time role. I think they're going to probably deploy a mix because they all bring different skill sets. Troy Franklin, notably more of a deep threat. Marvin Mims is somewhat of a deep threat, but then also gadgety, like screen work, coming out of the backfield, doing things like that. And then Pat Bryant is more of a short to intermediate kind of player. Someone that I think actually could take on Courtland Sutton's role if they saw some sort of decline in Courtland Sutton. Also, if Pat Bryant predominantly plays that wide receiver 3, I think that it's going to push Courtland Sutton into a deeper role. I wrote about him in my route depth article that I think the addition of Jalen Waddle, who's typically been more of a short route guy, which I think is maybe a little bit new to people because you think of Jalen Waddle being this incredibly fast guy, but he's actually ran short routes at like a 45% plus clip over the course of his career, really. But then even in every individual season, and that usually travels with players. So to me, that also pushes Courtland Sutton a little bit deeper. And then you add in a guy like Pat Bryant, who he's not really like a deep threat type of player. So to me, that all adds up. And then you end up seeing a situation where a guy like Pat Bryant pushes Courtland Sutton into a little bit of a deeper role, which he's actually pretty good at. It's just that doesn't translate as well to fantasy points, especially for a guy like Bo Nix. So I think that's the impact that I see. I don't know that any of these guys are individually going to be valuable in fantasy, but it is an impact to what happens with Courtland Sutton, in my opinion. And if there was one to step up, it would be Pat Bryant because he has the more like complete skill set of a receiver for that team. Really strong article out of the Pewter Report. They went through all of Emeka Egbuka's games and did like a film review of all of his games in 2025. And what they saw, so they did like a quarterly report, right? So Q1 for Emeka Egbuka, stud, right? We saw it. He was a wide receiver 1 in terms of fantasy value. He also looked really good on tape. Then we saw him get injured probably about week 6, week 7. He ended up being on the injury report for the first time. And then a guy like Mike Evans gets hurt, right? And then you see Chris Godwin struggling to come back. Basically what ended up happening based on their film review and then also my film review as well, Egbuka was kind of miscast into this X wide receiver role because they didn't have anyone else that could fulfill that, right? Jalen McMillan was out for most of the season. They didn't have Ted Hurst yet. They had Tez Johnson, but he was a late round rookie pick, so they couldn't just throw him in there. So they put him in this X wide receiver role, which is not necessarily what he is known to do. That doesn't mean he can't grow into that potential role eventually, I don't think it's the best use case of his skills. So the best use case of his skills is really the Z or F position, which is slot or kind of the move wide receiver flanker role. And they talk about how he struggles to get off the line of scrimmage against jam coverage, so press coverage, and playing through contact, which is funny because that's not actually what you saw out of college. It was just odd that he kind of got into that spot. So I think it was really a mix of so many different things that stacked up against Emeka Buka. And then you talk about the offensive line having issues for the Bucks and Baker Mayfield having 8 different injuries that came up throughout the season last year. I think there's a lot of positives for Emeka Egbuka going to the season. A lot of it hinges on the other receivers staying healthy, needing Jalen McMillan to be able to fulfill that X receiver role to start the season. Ted Hurst potentially filling that role as well. If Godwin gets injured, then you could see Egbuka out of the slot. I think he can operate from a slot role actually pretty well. So some of his production hinges on the other receivers being able to play in their roles really well. Especially we think about Zach Robinson with the McShanahan influence. That X receiver role is imperative. It makes the whole offensive engine run. So we're going to need some production out of that X receiver role. I think Jalen McMillan can do it well enough to start the season, and then we'll see how that ends up transpiring. Naturally, I think that this Bucks team is going to end up where Godwin isn't on the team long term. Maybe next year he's gone, and they transition Egbuka to more of that slot role, Jalen McMillan into that Z, and then Ted Hurst being that outside X receiver, or they draft somebody to help supplement as well. There's a video of Ricky Pearsall, and I got some flack for this, kind of with this, what I call a soft brace, but some people call it a sleeve. It's a soft brace for me. That's what my PT told me whenever I was going through, rehab on my knee. And, the big thing that I think through on this, and I was talking to some doctors about it. Great that he's wearing one for mobility, probably protection. The only thing that I think about is compare it to a guy like Cam Scatterbo who just did a backflip, doesn't care. A lot of times PTs like to see people that don't actually care to protect themselves as much, because what it signals to them is this guy's not thinking about his injury. He's going about all of his motions like he never got hurt. And that's part of return to play, return to performance, is showcasing the fact that you're not even concerned. Like, you're just going out there being you. And that's part of my concern with Ricky Pearsall. Jeff Mueller, who's a great follow on Twitter, his initial post was like, hey, this is fine, like compression sleeve, he's good. And then he came back to it, and he kind of observed this footage and saw that he's not necessarily getting full extension on that knee as well. So it is something that I'm watching, because he did sit out part of OTAs. And we have the history with Ricky Pearsall, and this is on his right knee where he had the PCL injury last year. I'm still a little concerned. We might just get a mix and match situation with these 49ers receivers if they can't stay healthy, where you see guys rotating in and out. We've seen Demarcus Robinson have big weeks. Kendrick Bourne had big weeks last year. We may end up seeing the exact same thing, given the fact that Ricky Pearsall, not a strong bill of health long term, what he's proven to be. And then same with Mike Evans. I think they can get by with just rotating receivers, and maybe they decide to rotate in general this season just to keep everyone fresh and make sure nobody's getting overloaded. Who knows? That's not a report. That's just my own kind of thinking internally. So we'll see what ends up happening there. Something to pay attention to deeply in training camp. Beat writer Patricia Traina actually answered 32 beat writers who I love following. I like their work. I know people think of us as quote unquote competitors. I don't consider it the same. I don't think they're a competitor of mine. I think we make iron sharpens iron. We're all kind of trying to help people do the same stuff. I don't care if anyone even were to come in here and do the exact same thing I'm doing. I would support them 100%. That's just kind of who I am and my personality. But I take this as kind of conjecture from Patricia. She went out there and kind of said that Malachi Fields is going to, her bold take was that Malachi Fields could lead this team in receiving touchdowns this season. don't care about the stat line, don't care about this like 50 receptions, 700 yards, whatever. What this signals to me is that we may see Malachi Fields operate as a number 2 or number 3 receiver sometime this season. And that's big because, we know what Darius Slayton is. I like him. I think he can get 600 to 700 yards. We've seen him do that. We kind of know what a Darnell Mooney looks like as well. He's had a 1,000-yard season, but he also has struggle staying healthy. So when you're thinking about all of these players kind of mixing in, right? You just want to know, is this new guy potentially going to get some work? And it's definitely possible because they don't have that much out there. So it would be nice to see Malachi Fields. I'm not a huge Malachi Fields based off of his tape from college. Also, kind of a slow receiver possession, more like a big bodied type of guy. But there are people in the film world where I've been wrong that like him. So you could do worse with just taking like kind of like a last round stab and see how it all plays out. Dynasty managers, you never know when a guy just comes up out of nowhere and becomes valuable. Opportunity matters, and it sounds like he will get an opportunity at some point this season to help out. Yeah, I want to just point this out. So last year I was tweeting about Kamunungai, probably even before this. Like, this is August 17th, 2025. I think my earliest tweets date back to like June or maybe even May about Kamunungai, and just like talking about how the team was really into him in general. So I just wanted to say, like, this is why I'm doing it. I want to make sure people get the value, get early information on these players, like signal the drumbeat, see what we can do with all of this information, and be early to the market on some of these guys because it really produces strong value and upside to yourself and to myself, actually, too. From a 49ers backfield perspective, I actually might have to go soon, just letting you guys know. I'm on dad duty as well. Have a couple little kids, and one of them might be waking up here in a second. Every source for the 49ers said that the backup running back battle is the biggest battle to watch. So that means to me 50-50, right? We don't know who's going to be the backup. This is one that could break fantasy because we know how fragile CMC has been historically. We saw what Jordan Mason did without a huge profile coming out and coming into the NFL, kind of coming out of nowhere. And then he was a top, 5 running back when he was actually producing the season that he broke out. I think about this too. So between the two, Kalen Black, Jordan James, the profile for Kalen Black, especially more recently, is that he hasn't had as much of like a pass catching type of profile. At Indiana, his max receptions, I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but it was like 5 receptions in a season. Maybe it was 4. But then at JMU, James Madison University, he had 27 one season. Jordan James college high was 26. Jordan James does have more of a pass catching kind of like feel to him. His profile wasn't like terrible in that regard coming out of college. On top of that, the team has kind of talked about why they moved on from guys like Jordan Mason and Brian Robinson. If CMC goes down, when they put a different running back in the game, they don't want to signal, hey, it's a run or hey, it's a pass based off of personnel. This is something that I keep hearing across the NFL in general. Like, a lot of these McShanahan type of offenses are starting to say this. So, and then we think about what I tweeted out like last week as well. We get into these situations where we write off guys in year 2 because they didn't do anything in year 1 at running back. And a lot of times year 1 running backs, especially guys that aren't drafted high, need to learn how to do things that can contribute to the team, right? So they added Brian Robinson last year because they know they can trust him to do some blocking and run the ball and just kind of run the offense. I think we may see a similar progression with a guy like Kalen Black. He needs more reps in pass pro. He needs more reps in pass catching, running routes. So to me, I'm starting to lean a little bit more Jordan James. Like, year 2, he's had some opportunities to learn the offense, to showcase what he can do from a pass protection perspective. Yeah, I think we might be overlooking Jordan James because they drafted Kalen Black. And I don't think that it's like, I think it's all relative that they're doing this because they typically like to draft guys so that they can rotate and mix guys in and see like what people can do. But Jordan James has a year of experience, and under his belt in this offense and has had the opportunity to potentially learn how to do pass blocking and the routes that they like to see out of the running back position. They're not going to run the same offense with CMC out, but um, they could at least have a formidable person back there. My bet right now is Jordan James, just given the fact that I think that he has some experience there. Got a shout out from Pat Carrain and Eric Biemafor on the legendary Sicko podcast from Spike Week and Legendary Upside. Follow those guys. Those are some of the brightest minds in the best ball world and maybe even in general. Smart guys for sure. Giants Insider also talked about Isaiah Likely and what we might see from him. He definitely thinks that we're going to see Isaiah Likely play more than 60% of the offensive snaps. I think a lot of people think that that's like a given. I initially, when I saw him sign, was like, yeah, maybe he doesn't, because I think Theo Johnson's not like a terrible tight end. I think he has a lot of skill and talent. He's a big guy. He can block. His BFF blocking grades weren't great, but like he has theoretical blocking ability. Theo Johnson does. So I was a little bit worried, but it's good to hear like they're going to do more 12 and 13 personnel. Isaiah Likely, I think, is an adequate blocker as well, not a world beater by any means. So it's good to hear that this could be more than that 60%. He really needs to get to a 70 or 75% for me to be like really interested. And I think that he has that capability this season. So I think he could be a really good value in fantasy drafts, potentially the number one target if Malik Neighbors misses enough time. At the very least, a number two target for the team right now, in my opinion. A lot of change going on for this Giants team in general, right? They've got a new system with Matt Nagy at the helm, and then on top of that, with Greg Roman kind of like, I guess, being the training wheels for him as well. Going under center for Jackson Dart. They're tweaking his throwing motion. They're tweaking the footwork. You know, a lot of people are into Jackson Dart because he showed really strong metrics in year one. And we've seen this before. Guys show really strong metrics in year one, and then year two, we see struggles sometimes. This situation, for me, leads to more struggle, right? We might not see Malik Neighbors to start the season. We're going to have Isaiah Likely, a new person in the room. We have a lot of new receivers that are being added to the room. New offense, new throwing motion, footwork, going under center. There's a lot that they're putting on Jackson Dart's plate that I think we could see him struggle to start the season. I know he's got the Dallas matchup to week one, and that is usually juicy. The Dallas's defense is probably going to be a lot better this season, given the changes in defensive coordinator and personnel. There's still time for them to add more to that defense too. So I am actually a little bit worried that Jackson Dart doesn't start out hot. Maybe he gets hot later in the season. But I'm seeing the way that this reads to me is more of a sophomore slump situation. Comparative. I think he has a lot of potential in general. I like him as a player. I just think that this situation is more of a sophomore slump situation than it is we're supporting Jackson Dart in every single way possible. Thank you, Nick Penikoff, for saying that people should follow me. I appreciate anything people think about me, even if it's bad. Timely information. So I've been watching a lot of these podcasts. David Lombardi does a nice show. I know people have varied opinions on him. I think, he even called me out on X, but turn the other cheek on that one a little bit. So with this, you guys can watch the video for this tweet, but Leonard Hankerson is going on a tangent about DeJon Stribling, saying that he's very versatile, compares him to Juwan Jennings in that way, that he's versatile and tough, that he can play the Z, the X, the F. Those are all varying wide receiver positions. And then Lombardi gives his commentary after that and talks about how, they're going to slot him in at that slot F receiver role that Juwan Jennings fulfilled for a while in his career. But that, they may want to get a peek at him as their long-term X, because Mike Evans isn't necessarily going to be around forever. I could see that happening. It does sound like a guy that's going to get playing time eventually. Like maybe week one, he's like a 30-40% snap share guy. But long-term, given who they have in that receiver room and how injury prone all three of their potentially starting guys are, right? Christian Kirk, Ricky Pearsall, Mike Evans. All of those guys are kind of fragile. And given the fact that they believe Dejon Stribling has that versatility, could easily see him slot in and eventually get a 70% plus route share role, especially in given weeks. And we've seen in the past, 49ers receiver, you just want it because anytime they play and they're healthy, they can really go off, and it's more a scheme based, Brock Purdy based than it is anything else. So I'm in on Dejon Stribling. I think that he has a lot of opportunity and upside. Even though I didn't really like the profile coming out of college, it seems like the NFL disagrees, and I'm okay with that. It's a cheap price. Inside the Bird says Mekhi Lemon will be a starter. They'll use him and Devonta Smith with reduced splits, and Lemon needs to prove he can get off of press coverage. They don't feel great about him missing OTAs with a hamstring injury. And then they believe that Dontavian Wicks would be the third wide receiver in 11 personnel, which is 3 wide receiver sets. This is the first time I've heard that Mekhi Lemon will be used in 2 wide receiver sets. Sean Mannion, new offense coordinator, coming in there, coming from Green Bay, where they like to deploy 2 tight end sets at one of the highest clips last year. So I think that there's some risk for Mekhi Lemon. I wouldn't take any of this as certainty because they're gonna try it out in training camp, right? They're gonna maybe even test him out in preseason. Given the investment, it makes sense that they would try to do it. Coaches come into the season with a plan. That plan can change given what they see on the field, right? I think this Philly offense may struggle a little bit to start the season because they're going through a big scheme change. They're going to go under center. They want Jalen Hurts to focus on throwing over the middle of the field, something he hasn't done as well in his past. Given all of that, and let's say that they do put Mekhi Lemon in that role to start the season. Let's say it doesn't go well. There's always a possibility that doesn't go well. The Jaguars wanted Brian Thomas Jr. to do everything last year and be a producer at all 3 levels. It didn't go well for him to start, even before he got hurt. So plans change. I think he's still probably a decent bet with his 70, 80, 90 ADP. I do like other receivers that go around him more just because the fit with Jalen Hurts for me is a little bit off. I think this is a great situation for Devonta Smith and even Dontavian Wicks because the way that he wins is he can win all over the field too. But we don't get access to talented rookie receivers in this range very often. Let's say it does work out. Sometimes you have to think about it that way too. It's not a terrible pick right now. I think you could do worse. I haven't taken much of him personally because I thought that he wasn't going to play in 2 wide receiver sets. But with that news and the logic behind it, I could see it, and I might start taking stabs at him where he is right now. All right, moving on. Bears Insider mentions that Xavier Thomas is someone that he's excited to watch heading into training camp. He looked smooth in the spring, could carve out that wide receiver 3 role. We know that Ben Johnson has trust in Khalif Raymond. Khalif Raymond isn't a full route share type of player, but they could split that role for a little bit. And we've seen guys like Olamide Zaccheaus just block a rookie last season in Luther Burden, someone who's super talented comparative to Xavier Thomas. It might be a while for Xavier Thomas, but it's good to hear that he has the opportunity to potentially win that wide receiver 3 role eventually this season. Not a bad dynasty asset. We see the speed. He could line up in the backfield a little bit. They could do gadgety stuff with him. Give him the opportunity. Let's see what happens. I think this is one you follow in training camp. See what happens. I wouldn't necessarily take him as a last round best ball pick right now or anything like that, or even in redraft. But in dynasty leagues, I think he's worth stashing on your bench at the moment. And as training camp goes on, maybe something happens and they just say, "Hey, we're gonna utilize him in a specific way," and then we can invest in potentially redraft leagues or best ball leagues. Best ball is probably the better fit for him. I talked about this. Again, we get a signal from coaches that tells us the guy isn't ready and extrapolate that to mean he's never going to be ready, right? So running backs when they're rookies, examples all from last year that was supposed to be a dominant rookie class. We see guys like, Bhayshul didn't play as much as we thought he would. DJ Goodens Dylan Sampson didn't play as much as we thought he would. Caleb Johnson, Jaden Blue, Jordan James. Someone said Todd Brooks. There's so many names out there that didn't get to play as much in year one. And then in year two, we saw guys like Kyron Williams, Blake Corum, Jace Brown, James Conner, A.J. Dillon, Ronald Jones, Jerome Ford. Some of these names don't even sound great, but when I looked at the stats, it's like, oh yeah, they had a 1,000-yard season. It's important. I think it's important to know that coaches don't necessarily trust rookie running backs all the time, especially when they're later round picks. We see some teams lean into it. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt got a role, and Kyle Monangai got a role, but not every team leans into that. So sometimes it takes time. These guys need to prove themselves in pass protection, pass catching. So that and we said it was a really strong rookie class last year. I'm wanting to bet on these running backs in year two, especially if I'm thinking about who the handcuff is for teams. I think teams will lean more into the guy that has some experience, like a DJ Giddens, like a Jordan James. Jaden Blue and Phil Maffa are kind of like in that same realm. So I think there's opportunity. Bhayshul Tuten, another guy that I think will step up this season and do a lot for that Jaguars team. That's why I labeled this as Bhayshul bias, because I'm pretty in on him. So yeah, that's my perspective on that. Don't completely fade these second-year running backs. It was a legendary class, and this class wasn't very good. You guys can check out some of my other pods, YouTube videos, however you like to see it. I've got it on Spotify, YouTube, across the board. You just search the Cut Up in general on whatever platform you want. You can listen to them sequentially. They all build on top of each other. They confirm some of the same notes. And you may get a different perspective after listening to a new one every single time, because I am always updating my thoughts as we go along and get more information. Moving on, we see there was something from ESPN that talked about, hey, if the season goes awry for the Jets, we could see Cade Klubnik get in there. Maybe he has a profile that they like. I don't think that it's a guarantee. I don't think it's a guarantee that he will get on the field if the team is decent, which I think this team has actually a decent offense. They could have a decent offense, because I don't think their offense line is terrible. It really hinges on Geno Smith. If he can, turn back the clock a little bit, be more of that Seattle type of Geno Smith versus what we saw last year, which I think is possible. I've said this many times, but the offensive line for the Raiders last year is one of the worst that we've seen in recorded history recently. So just having any improvement beyond that helps him, because he's a guy that holds the ball a little bit longer. He needs a little bit more time to throw. So I think there's an opportunity for him to showcase like he's not as terrible as he looked last year. Then you talk about the weapons with Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, and then their investment in Omar Cooper Jr., Kenyon Sadiq, A.D. Mitchell that they traded for last year. I think there's enough weapons here for this offense to look average this season, which could keep Cade Klubnik off the field for long enough. I don't expect this team to be very good in general, because their defense looks bad. But you never know. Teams surprise us every year. Geno Smith's one of my late round quarterbacks that I'm trying to take, because there's not very many that are going super late. Because I think the offense environment could lead to him having either garbage time because the defense is bad, and maybe they do decide, hey, what if we're just gonna keep Aaron Glenn for the full season just because we don't want to fire him. You never know how GMs feel about that kind of stuff. They let Robert Saleh finish it out. I can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, maybe they decide that they want to let him finish it out, and then he just rides the Geno Smith train all the way through, or Cade Klubnik doesn't look ready and they just don't want to do it. There's so many things that happen. We don't expect we don't expect some things to happen. Guys come out of nowhere: Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, even Geno Smith himself. So I think there's plenty of situations where this just could work out in a way where Klubnik gets on the field, or could not. It's different from the Cardinals situation. I think the Cardinals situation, they're going to play Carson Beck because they want to get a look at him before next season. If you want to see some of my other work, I did a podcast with Theo Greminger on RotoWire yesterday. I also did a podcast on Fantasy Life, the Fantasy Life show with Kendall Valenzuela and Peter Overzet. I also was on SiriusXM Fantasy Radio yesterday. You can catch me on Mondays from 10:20 a.m. Central Time for 15 minutes every Monday. And then I've got a show with Matt Harmon coming up on Thursday. I'm really excited about that one too. So the Theo Greminger one hasn't come out yet, but I'll let you guys know when it does. Check out some of the other work when you get a chance. Keeping us moving. Okay, Debo Samuel. Hearing that there might be some interest from the San Francisco 49ers. It's kind of odd because they've got a deep wide receiver room, right? Like deep in the fact that like they have significant investments there. They want to see what Ricky Pearsall can do. They want to see what Dejon Stribling can do. They have young guys in Cowing and Jordan Watkins that they feel solid about. They really like Demarcus Robinson too because he's just been able to be inserted into the offense and produce for them. Um, I don't really see a role for Debo. I'm still leaning that this doesn't end up happening because Debo probably will have better options for himself. But maybe he sits out for a while, and this Grant Cohen situation that he described, where Kendrick Bourne waited till like week 2 to join a team. Some injuries may happen, and we've seen injuries happen to these guys before: Mike Evans, Ricky Pearsall, Christian Kirk. Some injuries happen, and then he says, "Yeah, I'll sign. I'll come in here, play a role for the team." I don't know. Colts are also somewhat interested. I heard that that's the only other team that I've heard of actually. So yeah, I'm not certain that he's going to join the 49ers, but it's interesting to hear that like guys like George Kittle and Kyle Juszczyk are really trying to recruit him back and saying like, hey, my outhouse is available. I've got a guest house for you. Like we'll see where that transpires, but good to know that he could be into the mix. That would reduce values for probably Dejon Stribling because Debo would maybe slot into some of those more like versatile roles, the Z, the X. It could also hurt Ricky Pearsall. Maybe they would decide to do more of a rotation. We'll see. Bob Condetta. I need to get better at some of these names. Insider for the Seahawks talks about how they're going to replace the Kenneth Walker role or just replace Kenneth Walker in general in the running back room. Seahawks seem confident they will replace his production with a combination of first-round pick Jadarian Price, third-year player George Holani, and free agent signee Emmanuel Wilson. Again, guys, I keep saying this. They're signaling a running back by committee. We just don't know what the split is going to look like. I kind of see Jadarian Price as very similar to a J.K. Dobbins, except J.K. Dobbins has proven in the NFL that he's a really good running back, which means to me, hey, maybe he gets 15 touches, but are those touches the high value touches? Is he getting the receptions? Is he getting the goal line work? I don't know about the goal line part. That could be the Emmanuel Wilson role. Sharps may come back late in the season and get that role back as well. I don't think he's going to have the pass down work. So that's the concern I have. Like I compare him to J.K. Dobbins, then I see the price on J.K. Dobbins, and the obvious risk with Dobbins is that we know what his role is and that he's not going to probably be that pass catching back. And there's the mystery box element to Jadarian Price. Maybe he does do this. His profile doesn't lend himself to that. Again, rookies struggle in pass protection sometimes. I don't necessarily think that they're going to throw him out there. They have two guys who have shown that they can do pass protection in George Holani and Emmanuel Wilson. They trusted Holani to do that in literally the highest leverage spots in NFL history with a Super Bowl. So that's the part that I'm concerned about with Jadarian Price. I think that the price for him should drop, not considerably, but if he's going next to Chuba and Tony Pollard, he's sitting between those two guys in best ball right now. Not between those two guys, between Bhayshul Tuten and Tony Pollard right now. If he gets closer to Tony Pollard, that's where I think it's like, all right, I'm trading off like some offensive upside for um, a guy like Tony Pollard who has a really bad offensive line, and they could rotate a little bit more too with Tyjae Spears, Nick Singleton eventually. That's where I think the trade-off makes sense. So that's like a half round that I'm hoping he falls. Maybe to pick 70 in best ball drafts is where like I'm really hoping he falls to. And that's where I'm saying, hey, I'll invest. I still like George Holani as like a late pick because I think that he has the opportunity to earn more too. Jadarian Price didn't have a profile that I liked coming out of college that much. So I think there's risk in that situation. And, the answer could be invest in both too. And maybe they hit in different situations. They also talked about Charbonnet. Best case, mid to late October for Sharps is what they say. I don't think that's going to happen. That would be 8 months. We don't see that happen very often. Modern medicine is getting great. I don't know that it's getting that great. Um, I think November is the timeline. If things keep trending in the right direction, mid November or late November is kind of where I see him coming back, which means to me you're getting more of a situation where that he's not going to produce much fantasy value during your regular season, but does he do enough to produce fantasy value for your playoffs? Or does he do enough to take away from other players in the fantasy playoffs? Is really the way that I think about it. And I think the answer is yes. I think they'll give him back that pass down role when he comes back, as long as he looks somewhat healthy, and the goal line role. I think he would guaranteed get that goal line role actually over Jadarian Price, unless Price like just blows everything out of the water. Um, and I think that's the other reason why betting on Jadarian Price isn't the best bet. Is you're going to get squeezed at the beginning of the season probably, and then you're going to potentially get squeezed at the end of the season, and maybe even the middle of the season. That's why I want to see Jadarian Price fall a little bit more. The other thing that I said on this on the Fantasy Life show with Peter Overzet and Kendall Valenzuela is reports on the Seahawks are going to come out very soon. We're going to hear what the first team offense is, who's out there, the first running back on the field. I think the answer is going to be the same as what they did in OTAs. I think the first running back on the field with the first team, not that Jadarian Price won't also get first team reps, is going to be George Halani, just like OTAs. And when that happens, when that gets reported, because I will report that, we're going to see his Jadarian Price's price fall a little bit, and that's when you want to invest. Wait a couple weeks, maybe 1 week, and that's when the right time is to pull the trigger. Bhayshul Tootin, Chris Rodriguez, all of the metrics good for everybody. They don't matter. Volume's what matters, and there is the most predictive thing. And league winners come from guys that can produce in both the pass game and the rushing game. So if you want a league winner, the best bet between the two is going to be Bhayshul Tootin. If you want a payoff at ADP, like hey, Chris Rodriguez produces, round 7 value or round 6 value, you could definitely do that if he wins the role. I don't think that he will, but he could do that if you wanted to build that bull case. And that's still okay. Like from a fantasy perspective, not every pick is going to be a league winner. So you just kind of pick and choose. If you want the league winner, Bhayshul Tootin has that profile. If you want the good, the returns value on investment ROI, Chris Rodriguez can do that. Cam Scatterbo did a backflip, and he said that he's not changing who he is, and I think that's probably the best way to be. This got him to the NFL. His moxie, the way that he carries himself, the way that he does things, recklessness, that's who he is as a football player. It may not last for a long time in the NFL, but if he does have a fully healthy season, he's going to crush fantasy because he does the goal line work. He's a good pass catcher. And he's best friends with Jackson Dart. They're going to want him in the game. They're going to play him a lot. John Harbaugh wants to establish the run. He also wants to build a very hard-nosed team, and Cam Scatterbo embodies that. So that's what I see on him. Torrey Horton and Elijah Arroyo, they seem to want to get them a little bit more playing time. I don't really see a way that Arroyo gets in there as much, especially they kind of yin and yang each other, because if Horton's healthy, then and if Elijah Arroyo is healthy, what you end up seeing is them kind of taking away from each other, right? They're going to want to rotate these guys in, but Arroyo can't play that like inline tight end, and so that takes more opportunities from receivers off the field. Same with Torrey Horton. If he's healthy, if they want to get him some reps, that takes away opportunities from Elijah Arroyo. I do see more opportunity for Torrey Horton because what if Cooper Kupp gets hurt or Rashid Shaheed, right? And I actually think he's a really strong talent. He had a breakout game against the Commanders that could have been even bigger if he didn't get hurt, and then he ended up being out for the season after that. We saw the talent. I've compared him to like early rookie year Antonio Brown, where you saw like the game breaking like return skills, receiving skills. We just need to see him get the playing time. I think he's like a if you're in a deep dynasty league, he's like a stash because I still think there's opportunity for him eventually. But it may take some time for him. Arroyo is not someone that I'm investing in because I like AJ Barner. I think he's a really good tight end, both as a pass catcher and a blocker, and he's just dynamic. So, and he has versatility. So, I think Arroyo is one of those guys that needs a situation change to eventually pop. And I don't know that he's going to develop enough because he's not going to get enough playing time to even pop later on in his career. Vikings insiders were talking about the focus on the run game, so we're going to see that team run the ball a little bit more. They also want to implement a more Miami Dolphins style run attack this season, meaning that they would like to do more outside zone, or which leads to stronger production when it comes to explosive plays. I've talked about this before, and so what I think it makes a lot of sense there is I think we want to invest in this rushing attack. It's one of those I've talked about this on some other streams recently, but we tend to like take ourselves away from rushing games that are in potentially good offenses, which I think this offense could be good because they have other weapons that are solid. Um, and that's the opportunity. Like when the ADPs get really uh when they get to a point where it's like, hey, this guy's going at pick 100 as a starting running back in an offense that could be good, I tend to want to lean into that. And so this is one of those situations, ugly duckling, right? Like, which running back room do people not want to invest in? I think this is going to be a split. I don't really like either of the running backs that much. That's when I want to invest. So I'm investing in this Minnesota Vikings running back, and my running back of choice is going to be Jordan Mason this year because one, I think the team wants to utilize him and would like to run the ball more. They just didn't have the opportunity to because their offense wasn't doing very well. Commanders want to do more two tight end sets this season, and they believe this should benefit a guy like Ben Sinnott. He should see more playing time this season. I'm going to kind of speed through some of these things that are like less important. Commanders insiders, this is big. Commanders insiders believe Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt making a jump in the pass game is key to the offense. Matching what was said out of camp, the team would prefer not to tip their hand on run versus pass with personnel. I talked about this a little bit earlier, how some teams don't want to do that. Um, They think that it's more likely that Bill improves as a pass catcher versus Rashad White being like this dominant rusher. Doesn't mean that it is the case, but they see that Bill brings a level of explosiveness to the run game more than any other running back can, and then that they want to develop him in the pass game more so that they don't tip their hand on run pass splits. So my bet on this backfield is Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt, which goes against a lot of people that are really smart in this industry. Um, I think the price is kind of where I get back to this. Like we want to invest in the pass catcher back sometimes, but at a 120-ish ADP, like it's okay to invest in the non-pass catching back. I think that Bill will get this running role, and a lot of people are interested in Katron Allen. Um, I don't see it happening for Katron Allen this year at the moment, based off of everything that I've read and heard. That could change during training camp. Something to watch. Damian Martinez is potentially live for this Packers team if Marshawn Lloyd can't stay healthy. The Ravens want to extend Lamar Jackson. He can't be franchise tagged. I think he'll probably end up staying with the team just given the fact that that's what most players end up doing throughout their career. The Browns want to get Shador Sanders some reps this season just to see if he's the quarterback of the future. So whether he starts at the beginning of the season or not, I think that he's going to be the quarterback that ends the season for the team regardless. So if you are kind of thinking like, hey, deep league or best ball super flex or how that impacts some of the receivers, I think it'll be Shador Sanders. I actually think that he is the better lifter of the receivers out of him and Deshaun Watson for this season. I don't think Keon Coleman's going to have significant value this season. He is competing for that wide receiver 3 role. He was disciplined for tardiness multiple times in his career so far. Doesn't score well in separation. He was healthy and active last year. Don't draft Keon Coleman, guys. I don't think he's got the opportunity to do anything this season. Same with Xavier Legette, not a guy to draft. The Panthers pass offense doesn't project to be something that gets enough pass yards to support a wide receiver 3, let alone Xavier Legette is fighting for his life versus guys like Chris Brazzell, David Moore, Jimmy Horn. So I just don't think I think he'll stay on the team because he has a good relationship. He's a good locker room guy, but I don't think that he's going to win. Long term, I don't think he's going to be the wide receiver three. And also, I don't think that he is going to put up fantasy stats to matter either. Cowboys fan, so I'm going to talk about Cowboys defense sometimes. Marvion Overshone needs to be an all pro like he was 2 years ago. We'll see how that goes. Compared Parker Washington to Juwan Jennings from 2024. Um, I actually think Juwan Jennings would have smashed last year, given his role. Like some of his stuff from the early season that I looked at in terms of metrics, like my receiver score metric, he looked pretty good. He got crunched in the ribs and like basically broke all of his ribs, had to sit out. He also missed a lot of training camp, which didn't help. All of those things just kind of like pile on top of each other. Then you have Mac Jones playing instead of Brock Purdy. All of those things pile on top of each other and just add up to like the season that we ended up getting of Juwan Jennings. Um, in a different situation, I think it would have gone well, and that's kind of what I'm seeing for Parker Washington. I think that Parker Washington's also younger as a breakout and 23-year-old now 24. Um, so I'm inclined to believe it with that Liam Cohen slot role. I think that Brian Thomas will. This goes into my next tweet. This X receiver role in the McShanahan offense isn't always a consistent target option. Doesn't get like big target numbers. What they do get is, hey, you're the deep threat. You are going to potentially play a good red zone role. You have to perform off of efficiency in that role. And that's not a guarantee to end up happening. It's hard to thread the needle. There's guys that I talk about here. Brandon Ayuk in 2023 with the McShanahan offense, 49ers had crazy yards per reception. Mike Evans in 2024, Devontae Adams last year with the Rams, insane touchdowns. Even with Mike Evans, he wasn't doing that when Godwin was healthy. When Godwin got injured, he started doing more. So it's a tough needle to thread. I don't think like he can still pay off at ADP and get like 900 yards and 8 touchdowns. It's really hard for him to be like this big smash player because of his role. The big smash is more likely to be the slot receiver in this offense, the way that they perform this offense, the way that they designed it, and that's going to be Parker Washington for the most part. Now the question is, how much does Parker Washington play? Do they keep two wide receivers on the field more often? Do they lean into 12, 13 personnel? I can't answer those questions yet because we don't know. But from all indications, they want Parker Washington to play kind of a featured role in this offense. So he's the one that I'm betting on for the season. More speculation on the Packers RB2. They want Marshawn Lloyd to win that role and stay healthy, basically. So we'll see how it goes. More information on the Packers wide receiver room. I expect an increase in 3 wide receiver sets, and I expect them to rotate receivers less this season based off of everything that I've read and heard. I don't think that's priced into the market. I think people are still thinking that Matthew Golden and Jaden Reed are going to be subbing out a lot, that Jaden Reed's only slot, which I do think Jaden Reed is only playing as a slot receiver, but that I don't think they're going to go 2 tight ends as often as they have in the past. So that to me means that Jaden Reed is going to play more because they're going to go 11 personnel more from everything that I've read. They want to pass the ball more, so there's more routes available in general. They might go tempo more as well, so there's more plays happening. I think there's a lot of reasons to invest in this Packers pass catching room. I don't like Matthew Golden as a talent, um, but I have seen situations where I didn't really like Quentin Johnson as a talent, and then he breaks out a little bit more. They do a little bit of a role change. He grows as a receiver in year 2, which is allowed to happen. He gets more routes. And I can see that same thing happening for Matthew Golden, where we're not like super in on a player, and then they look because they look ugly, like they just don't have a good season, and then things click a little bit, and then they produce. I'm not seeing him being like this incredible wide receiver one by any means, but in a best ball situation, could he produce wide receiver 3 value, top 36? Yes, it's possible. I wouldn't. I'm not personally like betting on that 100% to happen, but he goes so cheap to where if you want to invest in this offense, it's not a bad bet to make. Hank Bigsby is the running back 2 for Saquon. I talked about this. He's cheaper than Woody Marks and Isaiah Pacheco in best ball leagues right now. I'm not as familiar with what Yahoo ADP looks like at the moment, but he is somebody that I think is like one of the better backup running backs, and he's like a locked in handcuff. So I think he should be going above those guys in his situation because this is an offense that has a really strong offensive line, which produces strong running back totals. Malik Washington is going to be the starting receiver, which means that Kevin Coleman will probably not be because he's more of a slot only. But that doesn't mean that Kevin Coleman won't earn that role later in the season. It's just Malik is going to be one of the starters, maybe a favorite target, maybe number 2 target behind Greg Dulcich early in the season. We're going to see a lot of information on the pup list, right? Like pup lists are going to come out for training camp. It's training camp pup. So that means a guy can come off training camp pup at any time, but the market doesn't price that in. So when a guy goes on training camp pup out of just randomness, people are going to get scared. AJ Barner might go on training camp pup because he had surgery this offseason. He's going to play week 1. Doesn't matter. Zach Charbonnet will go on training camp pup probably. Uh, there's other guys, maybe Christian Kirk, maybe even Ricky Pearsall, like just to be on training camp pup for like 2 days to start training camp. It can happen. Values are going to change because of that. There's guys that are coming into it, coming off injury. Maybe even Mekhi Lemon starts on training camp pup. Who knows? Like he had a hamstring injury at OTAs. We'll see how that goes. It can be a 1-day stint on training camp pup, but the market gets scared. So that's the time to scoop some of these guys. Peter Report was reporting on Ted Hurst. They believe he could be in the mix to start in 11 personnel, but then they talk about how, Godwin, Buka, McMillan are going to be kind of on ice during this preseason time, and Hurst will be wide receiver 4 if things go well. So I see this as like he's going to rotate in a little bit, right? Like they might want to keep Godwin fresh because he's coming off of like the ankle issues. They may want to like keep Egbuka from overworking himself and doing like a 90% route share. Maybe they want him at 80%. Same with Jalen McMillan. He had injuries last year. That was less like lower body, but um, they might want to keep these guys fresh and rotate them in. That doesn't mean that they're not going to see an 80% plus route share. That just means that there's room for one other guy to kind of like mix in. And if Hurst looks good, he could play more. I think it's going to be a far cry for him just because he's coming from, we don't see it that often where guys are really, really good when they come from, non Power 5 Division 1 teams, but we'll see. Maybe late in the season if the team doesn't perform well. Torrey Horton wasn't on training camp pup, but he could go on pup. I actually, from everything that I read, wasn't that he wasn't going to go on pup, previous to the fact that some of these other players went on pup. So something to pay attention to. I'm not going to talk about Seattle running back again because I've kind of given my thoughts there. I did this show with Peter Overzet, Kendall Valenzuela. You guys should check it out. Really good show. Subscribe, like all their stuff. They're good people. Peter Overzet said I'm an animal. Thank you, Pete. Did a best ball stream as well. If you're into best ball content, I'm doing streams. I'm not going to be able to do all 150 on stream because I just don't have the availability to do that. But I will continually do some on stream throughout the week. Going deeper, Corbin Smith said that there's still time for Zach Charbonnet to be added to the training camp pup. So I still think that that'll probably happen given the fact that he's probably not going to come back till November. Jeremiah Love's going to be a bell cow, so don't worry about that, guys. James Conner and Trey Benson need to prove that they're healthy, is what I took away from some of this Cardinals beat report. Yeah, it's odd that they're not healthy. They've been out for such a long time. We're going to see what ends up happening. Maybe one of them starts on training camp pup. Well, who knows? I still think that James Conner will be the running back that stays in the Cardinals, which is kind of a hot take because most people keep saying Trey Benson. I think it comes back to play. The role that I see is for James Conner, like franchise cornerstone type of guy. They still have the same GM, Monty Austin Fort. Can he be a veteran leader? Can he help Jeremiah Love learn pass protection better? Can he help him learn how to run routes better? Different things like that he could provide that Trey Benson can't. Trey Benson has never really even proven that he's been able to stay healthy. I think that he provides more to that team and means more to that franchise, and that's the reason why I think he's going to stay, and Trey Benson may be the guy that gets cut. Unless they decide to keep 4 running backs, which teams don't typically do, but you never know. All right, who's ready for Tet McMillan to be a power slot? I know I am. That would be really exciting for him. Uh, in this article, they posted that Tet McMillan, they may try to work him in slot role and in a slot role. He has the ability to create mismatches inside, so that's something that they'll continue to explore. Uh, as with Tet McMillan, the fact that he can do it creates opportunities to expand the arsenal. The fact that Tet can play in the slot can expand his arsenal, get some different ways to get him available. Um, this would be huge for him. Being in a slot, power slot, being in the slot is in general is sometimes a fantasy cheat code. We want our guys to be in slot receiver positions. I think that last year I think Tet was at like a 20% slot role. Let's say that that ticks up to 35%. Would be huge for him. I'm still not super invested in Tet because I think that he's a small win player this season. I don't think he's going to be a guy that gets to like a 1,500-yard season, just given the lack of what I see going on in that offense in general. But I could see him having a small win, right? Right now, he's going like kind of that 3-4 turn in best ball drafts. He had 1,000 yards last year. Could he have 1,200 yards? Absolutely. And is that a big win? No, because we're trying to go for like the big boom of 1,500 plus yards and 10 touchdowns and all sorts of stuff. But is it a good season? It's a great season. That pays off at ADP value. Um, so I can see situations where he has that 1,200-yard season. And so that would be a reason to invest. This power slot would help him out as well. Keep getting confirmation from various outlets that Parker Washington will be that slot role for Liam Cohen, and I've talked about how important that is. Chris Godwin in 2024, when he was healthy, was a top 5 wide receiver in terms of overall fantasy value. When he was when he was that slot receiver role in Liam Cohen's offense. We're going to see potentially a contract extension for Parker Washington happen here in the next week or two. And then they also talked about a larger role in the offense. And then Liam Cohen also had a quote about him playing inside and outside and being good at both. His targets per route run, better from the outside. Like, this proves that he can play in 2 wide receiver sets. Whether he does or not, we don't know yet. But the fact that he can is big. A guy that I want to bet on in this season is Parker Washington. I think he has a lot of opportunity, showed a lot of good things on tape. Good yak player, too. Interesting notes on Chris Rodriguez versus Bhayshul Tootin. This goes back to my Bhayshul bias as part of the title. Speculation on Bhayshul Tootin as the starter, and Chris Rodriguez as the backup / short yardage back, and then some concern on Chris Rodriguez missing the spring. I said this too. Bhayshul Tootin and Chris Rodriguez both have roughly the same amount of time that they've spent with Liam Cohen. Actually, Bhayshul Tootin has more time that he spent with Liam Cohen because he spent all of last season with him and some of this season with him, the offseason with him, whereas Liam Cohen was only with Kentucky for that short period of time and then left. So I see this as a situation where people are thinking like, hey, there's this relationship, and the relationship exists between both of them and Liam Cohen. On top of that, Chris Rodriguez misses all of the spring trying to get up to speed with this offense. It's not the same offense as Kentucky. It's a little bit different. And then is there potential that coming off of foot surgery, they decide to limit some of his reps in practice? That creates another avenue for Bhayshul Tootin to take control of this backfield. I see all of this happening in my head. It sounds like the team really wants a guy like Bhayshul Tootin to take advantage of this opportunity. It's really on him. I think he has the talent to do it. We're going to see what ends up happening. Consensus among Dolphins insiders is that Chris Bell will likely start on training camp PUP. I also think they'll probably start the season on PUP. It sounds like the team wants to like slow play him in 2026, so they don't have a reason to just bring him back immediately. So we'll see what ends up happening there. It takes a while for guys like that to have return to performance. The guy that they do believe in having a role this season is Caleb Douglas, because he presents something unique to that receiver room. He's a big receiver. He's fast. Things that they need, they don't necessarily have. They have Tutu Atwell as the fast receiver, but he's a small guy. They have Malik Washington, small guy. Jalen Tolbert, not fast, but also not huge. they're not going to be a good team this season, most likely. So what they're going to do is they're going to invest in some of these young guys. They spent a pick on Caleb Douglas earlier than most people thought because he presents something different than all the other receivers. He's the rookie wide receiver right now, in my opinion, that you would want to draft that has an opportunity to potentially do something. Maybe not early in the season. Maybe he'll rotate in, but at some point this season. Colts can get out of Daniel Jones in 2027. I actually see if they don't do well, I could see them easily like saying, "Hey, we're done with Daniel Jones," and moving on from that situation. So this is a 1-year audition again for Daniel Jones, Shane Steichen as well, who could get fired. Never know. And if Shane Steichen's gone, what's the reason to bring back Daniel Jones? Maybe the new offense coordinator wants to do something different. Or sorry, head coach and offense coordinator want to do something different. Dynasty managers, we don't know what's going to end up happening with Daniel Jones in 2027. John Keim has his own report, his own podcast, talks about Commanders wide receiver 2 situation, says they really don't know what the situation is. Doesn't have more information on Stephon Diggs at this moment. Everyone from the coaching staff and front office is kind of on vacation right now, and next week is the week where he's going to be able to find out more. I'll keep you guys posted on what I hear on that situation. In The Athletic today, they posted about Roman Wilson. He's the wide receiver 3 in 11 personnel for the team. I will continually say this, but he is probably not going to have that role long term, in my opinion. They're going to want to get a look at Jeremy Bernard long term. Bernard is more versatile. He doesn't just play in the slot. What that does for the offense is it allows them to rotate guys. Jeremy plays in the slot. Pittman plays in the slot. Pittman will probably more likely play in the slot than Jeremy does. And then Jeremy can do some of the deep stuff. He can do some of the intermediate stuff. He can do the short stuff. Roman Wilson, more of a one-trick pony, deep guy, vertical guy. It may be better for a guy like DK Metcalf when Roman Wilson is in the game because he will do more of the vertical stuff, which allows Metcalf to do more short and intermediate stuff. Pittman, I don't think will have much of an impact in terms of like if Roman Wilson were to be on the field, other than the fact that he won't be in the slot. But his role, I think Pittman's role is kind of like what Pittman's role is going to be in terms of the types of routes that he ends up running. It's just a matter of where he aligns. And so Jeremy, I think later in the season will probably be in there. I don't really want to invest in either Roman Wilson or Jeremy. I like investing in Michael Pittman out of all the receivers in that room at the moment. Raiders are going to do a lot of unique things with their tight ends. They're going to want to play both tight ends. We already talked about this earlier. Tight ends are a key part of the Kubiak system. They will move them around the formation, do screens. They're going to keep Brock Bowers the focal point of this offense, guys. He's going to do a lot. He could break fantasy this season. If you don't take him, it shouldn't be because of him. It should be because the opportunity cost of, hey, I don't know if I can get the running back I want, or hey, I don't know if I get the receiver I want. Bowers is going to be great. The addition of A.J. Brown, I keep reading 2 or 3 different articles so far that I've read, is the impact that it'll have on the running game, because the running game was notably had a bunch of stacked boxes with safeties being in the box. The fact that they were able to put a Ramondre, the fact that they're able to get an A.J. Brown means that there is an opportunity to draw safeties further back. What that does is it probably limits guys that play that deep receiver role, like a Kayshon Boutte, Kyle Williams, or even Mac Hollins. But it helps the running game. It helps guys like Ramondre Stevenson and Travion Henderson able to get to the second level a little bit easier, less guys in the box. Then you get more explosive plays. So I think this is a really big positive for both of those guys. I'm excited about Ramondre specifically in fantasy this season. But let's say Travion gets a bigger role. I'm also excited about that. I'm going to be on another stream with Sean Mitchell. We're going to do a best ball stream, a best ball mania together. Make sure you guys tune into that tomorrow. It will be a blast. I also do my own best ball streams. All right. If there's any questions in the chat, I probably have 1 or 2 that I can take. Let's see. There was, who are your favorite year 2 last round dart throw running backs? Jordan James is one that I talked about already. DJ Giddens is another. Yeah, those are a couple that I think are in situations where if the starter goes down, they have an opportunity to showcase something big there. other chat questions? Yep, nothing else. All right. So from the Tight 10, from Zane Donani, follow me on X, like, subscribe to my YouTube, The Cut Up Show. Thank you guys for everything. Thank you for the participation. If you guys ever have questions, reach out to me. If you want to have me on a pod, I'm happy to do it. Thanks, guys.